Welcome, everyone. We continue our series entitled League of Women Voters Empowering You, a program designed by the League of Women Voters with Dayton Access Television to provide unbiased, nonpartisan information on issues that are relevant to our friends and neighbors throughout the Greater Dayton area. My name is David Bodary. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters and your host this evening as we discuss our topic, League of Women Voters Empowering You, Money, Politics, and Democracy. Our guest tonight is Mary Sue Gmeiner. Mary Sue is a member of the Greater Dayton League of Women Voters, but also co-chair of the Greater Dayton Move to Amend organization. And welcome, Mary Sue.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased that we're going to have a chance today to talk about some of the issues related to money and politics. Sometimes it's talked about as dark money. And so I think it'll be an interesting conversation, and I look forward to getting into it with you. So thank you. I think it's helpful to understand first sort of what is the impact of money on politics. And of course, this is not something new. Money has influenced politics since politics existed. So, but it's also changed, right? And it's becoming more problematic. And so let's talk a bit about some of the things that have impacted that issue.
Well, I thought the timing was interesting because we are coming up on the 14th anniversary of Citizens United versus FEC, January 21st, 2010. And Citizens United is well known as the Supreme Court case that opened the floodgates of big money. So we have seen dramatic increases in the amount of spending since Citizens United.
Absolutely.
But we have, as you said, always had this problem of money in politics. And how does a candidate take donations from a business or a union or a trade association, big donations, and then ignore what they might want to have favored?
Certainly. All at the same time that we're seeing greater disparities between the common citizen, right, and the wealthiest citizens or the larger organizations in the United States.
Yeah, wealth inequality, definitely.
Absolutely. And so I begin to worry about, well, what impact does my voice have compared to all of those dollar voices, right, that are influencing or potentially influencing the politicians that are elected?
I'm already getting plenty of requests for money from candidates, and I think they do want individual donors. You know, they do, and they do pay attention to that, but mostly in terms of the numbers.
Right.
You know, how many do they get? And it's considered kind of a badge of honor if your donation numbers are low by average. So, you know, the average donor is only giving me $35, you know, so I'm not one of those big money candidates. Right. But the reality is probably a lot different.
Sure. And of course, I began to take a look as we prepared to sort of have our discussion tonight at how the influence of money has changed over time. And I started to look at 1990s and how much did it cost to run a campaign for a state or maybe a House position. And then I began to look more recently, and as you said, the 14th anniversary
right.
of Citizens United, and what I saw was the graph was sort of dramatically going up in the more recent times, and so pretty dramatic effect that this Supreme Court decision, Citizens United,
right.
has had on how money could flow into campaigns.
So 2008, that was the last presidential election before Citizens United. Approximately $5.3 billion was spent on federal elections. So the presidential election and Congress, Senate.
So 2008,
5.3.
B with a billion.
Billion.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. 2020, our last presidential election, 14.4 billion.
Wow.
So 2.7 times, I think, is what it calculates out to. Yeah, it's a big difference.
And so, and that money is coming from individual donors, but also organizations, right? PACs or super PACs, as you said, union organizations or other kinds of trade associations.
Trade
And-
associations. The one that really I like to mention, it concerns me maybe the most, is the trade associations, because oftentimes those are, if not controlled by, certainly influenced by foreign investors.
Oh.
So think about big oil, all of the oil producers. Well, one of those oil producers is Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
And they certainly have membership in a trade association in the United States that is going to be donating money to campaigns. The money that goes into these campaigns from the trade associations is huge. And it's definitely designed to influence legislation.
Right. As I did my research, I also thought about, well, what are some examples in Ohio of when that has happened? And of course, I didn't have to look very far.
No.
Because First Energy
Right.
certainly saw an opportunity to back a candidate, and in the process of gaining Larry Householder the position, and then eventually he gained enough support to become, I'm going to get the name wrong, the speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And then influenced legislation. And so essentially is now in prison because of the, I guess I'm not using the right word.
Bribery.
Thank you. The bribery that he accepted, and others, right,
Yeah.
in support of First Energy. And it's absolutely wrong, and yet it's hard to sort of, not want to look at this money and say, yeah, but people needed the money to get elected, and then that money influenced or corrupted their decision making.
And the reason he's in jail is because they were too overt about it. So understandings, quiet understandings, happen all the time that aren't criminalized, if you will. They're not seen as criminal, but the influence is there.
I was going to say that's no less corrupt. It just isn't criminalized.
There
I like
you go.
the way you say that.
Yeah.
Frustrating, though, for a person who wants to believe in democracy and support an effort where the citizens have a voice.
And we still are paying for that House Bill 6 that First Energy and Larry Householder got passed. So it's in your electric bill and mine.
It's frustrating.
It is.
It's frustrating.
It is.
And, this whole idea that a business, a corporation, is a person, which essentially is what Citizens United suggested, and then that person has the right to speak using money, right? So that
Right.
money is speech, in essence. That's problematic, and I think it's problematic for our democracy, from my perspective.
So I want to go back just a little bit and talk a little bit about the history.
Sure.
Because when we talk about Citizens United being allowing corporate personhood, that decision actually goes back to 1886. We've been in this for a very long time, and Citizens United is like the poster child of corporate personhood, and it's gotten the most attention, which, as you know, I appreciate because I want to overturn corporate personhood. But actually, originally corporations, when they were chartered by a state government for a particular purpose, given a shelf life, 10 to 20 years. So capital was pooled in order to build a road or build a dam. Once the job was done and the money was earned, the corporation was dissolved. And that has changed, obviously, over the years. Now corporations live forever, and excuse me, lost my train of thought.
That's all right. So the
Sorry.
corporations do live on forever, and the money continues to accrue.
Right, but we could still stop the charter. We could stop a corporation, but it's never done anymore. And charters are kind of perfunctory. They have them. But the point I wanted to make is that the corporate power relates to corporate personhood, and that is that these corporate entities have constitutional rights. And when we talk about Citizens United, we're talking about the constitutional right of freedom of speech. Okay, so freedom of speech is just one of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights. There's many other parts of the Constitution that corporations also have been given rights to. So Citizens United, freedom of speech, and back in 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo was another decision that said money is equivalent to free speech. So we couldn't have Citizens United without that one. In other words, this has been going on for a very long time, and the real concern is that these corporate constitutional rights can create havoc everywhere, not just in elections.
As I think about this, I feel like there's this sort of slow erosion to the representative democracy that I thought I was learning about in grade school. That these corporations, therefore, have these voices that have a larger influence, perhaps, than my own vote or my own voice.
Yes.
And that's concerning to me.
They do. That's absolutely.
Somehow I thought, though, that prior to Citizens United, corporations had limits in terms of how much they could contribute. Am I wrong about that?
No, they did have limits.
Okay.
Congress can always pass laws, and McCain-Feingold was an example
Right.
of campaign finance law. What happens is that the Supreme Court can decide something, and then those laws get gutted or thrown out completely. So there have been limits in the past. Now, you'll notice that there are limits at the state level. So we're talking Supreme Court, federal level, and then Ohio or whatever. The state level has their own laws, their own limitations.
That might put limits or restrictions on those
On
contributions.
state representatives,
Right.
on state senators, on the governor, whatever, yeah,
Right.
they could.
Okay. So it's challenging, and Move to Amend is an effort to try to address some of the challenges that this is presenting. Is that correct?
Right.
Tell
right.
me more about Move to Amend.
So Move to Amend was started back in 2009. People recognized that the Citizens United they were pretty sure it was not going to go the way they wanted. But they were a group of people who had been working on corporate constitutional rights for a while. And it was an organization called Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy that had existed for years and studied this. But they felt that a new organization was needed to really combat corporate constitutional rights after Citizens United, because money in elections, the money as speech, was also going to become a much huger issue. So our goal is to pass a constitutional amendment that says corporate entities do not have constitutional rights, only human beings have constitutional rights, and that money does not equal speech, and money is to be regulated in elections. So that's the wording of our amendment, basically.
Okay, thank you. So in a sense then, obviously citizens, individual human beings, would benefit from that.
Yes.
What are some of the other benefits that you can see could come from making this amendment?
This amendment is like a foundation. Everything that corporations, and when I say corporations, I need to emphasize corporate entities. I'm not against corporations per se, but it includes unions, it includes nonprofits, it includes those trade associations and so on.
Right.
So these corporate entities take advantage now of their constitutional rights. And one example would be search and seizure. You know, we as human beings, we have a right to be protected from government search, unwarranted search and seizure.
Right.
A factory might get a surprise inspection and then turn around and sue the government saying that this was unwarranted search and seizure, and they as a corporate person should not have to undergo that. So it kind
But that factory could be processing food that people consume, and it would be in our our safety could be hindered if we don't have the ability.
Exactly. So regulations are dampened It's not that they don't exist, but those regulators know that they can't step too far,
Okay.
or they may get slapped back. Another example, say a small town wants to keep out the big box stores. So they pass a zoning regulation that the size of a store can only be X number of square feet. And one of these large big box stores says, you know, we would have made, I don't know, $50 million on this particular town, and you're not letting us build here, so we're going to sue you. And it's under the takings clause, in the same way that if the government takes your house, they have to pay you for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this future profits lost.
Right.
And this has been done. They'll
Really?
say, oh yeah, the takings clause. You can, you know, a town could easily go bankrupt. So they're not going to do it. They're not going to pass that law because they have that threat over them.
Right. And all related to a corporate entity having these personhood rights.
Yes.
And are super PACs and PACs also considered part of that corporate entity?
They would be, yeah, they would be corporate entities
And of course,
as well.
my observation is super PACs or PACs sometimes have these very flowery, beautiful names that may have nothing
That
to
mean
do
nothing.
with what they
Yeah.
actually have as their agenda or objective.
Right, the Defend Democracy Foundation, whatever it is, yeah.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. So it sounds great, but do I believe it? I'm reminded in my own classes on campus, right, we teach communication, names or words, right, take the place of anything, right? So I give something a name, it's called a plant, but I could have called it something different, and it's still, as long as we all agreed, it would be a plant. So with these PACs, these super PACs name themselves something that they all agree on, even though it may have nothing to do with what it is that they represent or wish to achieve.
Right.
Yeah.
Another point
Go
I
ahead.
just want to make is that taking away constitutional rights does not hinder a corporation's ability to do business. They would be subject to statutory rights, you know, statutory legislation. So they still exist under law. Laws can be passed to help them or hurt them or whatever. It's the constitutional rights that are the problem.
I'm imagining, so the people that are for this move to amend would be people, right? Citizens,
Yeah.
individuals. But the people against it would be people that are representing these large entities that benefit from
Right.
being a corporate entity that's considered a citizen. So I'm just imagining if this process were to continue, the amount of money that would be spent by corporate entities, right, to vote to get people to vote against a constitutional amendment.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We can anticipate that.
We probably don't have as much opposition yet as I would like, you know, because that's what's going to happen. As we build this democracy movement, which is what we call it, you know, Move to Amend is really focused on the constitutional amendment as part of a broad-based democracy movement. And as we build that, opposition will continue to grow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, so this must follow a process. If we're making a constitutional amendment, we must follow some sort of a process. Can you tell me more about that process and where are we?
So we have, we have the amendment as legislation in the House of Representatives. It's House Joint Resolution 54. It was introduced by Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, and it has herself and 75 co-sponsors in this particular legislative session. So we have not yet gotten it introduced into the Senate. Most of the senators who are open to it want to see a bipartisan introduction, and we haven't accomplished that yet. We haven't found one on both sides of the aisle to do that at the same time.
Right.
So we're still working on the Senate. But we really need to also do the grassroots. So we focus on resolutions and ballot initiatives. City of Dayton has passed a resolution. We did that back in 2014.
Okay.
And ballot initiatives are even better because then we put it on the ballot and all the citizens have to vote on it. You
Get
know,
to read about
we
it.
haven't done that one here yet. But in Ohio, we've got 16 resolutions and 10 ballot initiatives that have been passed on this.
Okay.
And other states have even better numbers, some of them. So we're working on both ends, the federal level in Congress, and then also at the grassroots level to get people aware of it and supporting it.
So just to make sure that people have a chance to learn more, the website would be www.movetoamend.org.
Right.
Is that correct?
Movetoamend.org. And if they put in movetoamend.org/motion, they will be able to sign our petition, which is not a legal petition. It's simply adding their voice. Right. So when I call up my congressperson and say, you know, I want you to do this, and I also have 2,000 people in this area who have signed this petition, so they want you to do this also.
Right.
So it really helps us when they sign that petition online.
Right. So often, as I sit in this chair and we have these conversations, we look at gerrymandering, for instance, in the state of Ohio, and how frustrating the gerrymandering has been. Certainly, we've made extensive efforts in the state constitution amendments to try to move to resolve that, and we continue. That was last month, actually, we talked about that. But the other issue is the money in politics. Are there other things that either other countries or other communities are doing to try to address money in politics that you're aware of?
Well, we talked about how the state level can be different than the federal level.
Sure.
So and there are certainly other amendments out there, other organizations working on overturning Citizens United. Move to Amend is the only one that adds that piece of corporate constitutional rights, which we believe is essential to get the job done.
Right.
You know, because there's just too many other holes in it. You know.
For me, I think the money in politics is this great sort of frustration, and yet maybe I'm too Pollyannish, right? I believe that we can have a better system, but I do believe that we need to work toward that better system. Are there other things that people can be doing to become better educated or more informed or just more aware?
You know, one thing is that people really need to stay abreast of the issues. Because we talked earlier about the money, you know, and this flood of money, and it really has changed the conversation in Citizens United of everything is all about the money. How much money have they raised and so on. So raising up the issues, educating yourself on the issues, watching your programs so that they know what these issues are. I think, you know, all of that is very important.
I think about that, and I think about how often I read in my local news how much money was collected.
Yeah.
And yet I'm thinking, well, why are those column inches being used to talk about money collected when what I really care about is a decision, or how does this candidate approach the environment, or some other issue of importance?
And you need to know where that money is coming from too, because that's who's going to be doing the influencing.
Well, and that's the other part of this, that I think Citizens United made it possible for people to donate money to these PACs. Or these super PACs.
The super PACs have no donor lists available.
Right.
And that's the dark money. The dark money is where did it come from, who donated it, what is their agenda that we just don't know.
Right. It is scary, honestly.
Yeah.
Am I wrong to be afraid?
No, you're not wrong to be afraid.
I'm sorry to admit it, but I feel like it's really scary, and that, you know...
We should be out in the streets. You know, I mean, seriously, our democracy is threatened, and we need to speak up. We need to be louder and louder about that. So,
are there other things voters can do to fight the influence of this spending?
You know, I think being aware of the psychological effect of the ads is maybe the other thing that's important to remember. You know, just pay attention when you're seeing this ad. Who are they targeting? Why are they targeting those people? There are a lot of fact check organizations that can help a lot. So I think we really have to be aggressive in looking at everything that's coming towards us from these candidates especially.
I appreciate that so much, and a reminder to think about the ads and to think about them in a critical way, so that I'm looking at, all right, who is this aimed at? How are they trying to target me or the person that's aimed at? But also, how are they trying to use my own maybe internal biases against me, or in what ways are they trying to perhaps manipulate, right, the circumstance?
Yeah.
Of course, Aristotle taught me a lot about persuasion, and so there's three things that Aristotle taught me, right? It's logic, but it's also credibility, and then it has to do with emotion. And sometimes what happens is they're using emotion to hide the fact that it lacks the logic or lacks the credibility.
Right.
And so whether it's the strong music or it's the sort of tear-filled whatever, right, acting, and I always go back to Aristotle and remembering that, look, it's the three together, right? It's the logic, and it's the credibility, and it's the emotion that's most persuasive. And I have to kind of make sure that I'm taking it all into account. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that very much. We've done some shows here talking about misinformation and disinformation. I guess with a presidential election year coming up, we can anticipate more of that.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Sadly.
I think so.
And I guess the other thing is that as it relates to these sorts of groundswell efforts to really take back a democracy, there will be resistance to it. And so we can anticipate that as well. That's called inoculation theory, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn more, you can come to my class. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to share?
It just occurred to me that we haven't really talked about the youth. And I think that maybe the other thing that people need to do is think about how do we get young people more involved in democracy. We're actually doing that with Move to Amend. We're going to have an art contest coming up for 9th through 12th grades to say, what's the democracy we want? And asking them to participate in this art contest. So how do we get youth involved? How do we make them aware that democracy is for them too?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Democracy requires us to be engaged and active, not passive bystanders. This isn't a spectator sport. It starts by becoming first a registered voter and then continues as we educate ourselves to vote, and then it relies on our active participation, not just in one election, but in every election. So there's lots of work that still needs to be done as we continue to create that more perfect union. I appreciate, Mary Sue, your efforts to help educate me and to all of us to help us be better informed to participate in our democracy. I want to thank the viewers for participating tonight, for listening. I want to thank Mary Sue Gmeiner. She is a member of the Greater Dayton League of Women Voters with me, a co-chair for the Greater Dayton Move to Amend organization, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The League of Women Voters encourages everyone to participate in every election. If you have further questions about this or upcoming programs, you can contact the League by emailing league@lwvdayton.org or calling our office. The number there is 937-228-4041. Thank you for sharing your time with us.